Good to have you back here at the SMITE Console League. Finch joined by Anatoly as we check out Xbox EU. We're in the middle of the Dobbos Disciples going up against Team Ricardo. And right now, Dobbos Disciples are up in a Game 1 victory that really was never particularly close.
Yeah, I think a lot of it came down to picks and bans, specifically this Odin pick towards the end of the phase. It really hindered the Sylvanas that was constantly locked in alongside the Jean-Qui. It didn't really help that the Hercules was picked in after the fact.
Right.
I think that Fly on the Jean-Qui had a fantastic performance, ending the game at 9-2 and 10.
Yes, a very, very strong performance for him. You and I were saying that this was such a good Odin pick that they might have to get an early Phantom.
Yes.
But we hadn't considered the no Phantom tech that came out from Ricardo. Just unfortunately wasn't the play.
No, definitely not the play there. No. A couple of blinks to compensate. Maybe you blink away from the cage. Maybe you blink past the cage.
Right.
Dive the backline. Neither option was successful.
No, unfortunately, Mr. Turtle ended up getting bullied quite heavily on the Sylvanas in that game. They made him the target. As you pointed out, Fly had a great game, so did Switch that time. Colossal as well was the one that actually piloted the Odin, went 2-1 in 16 and really punished. So now some adjustments are going to be made by Ricardo as they move into the picks and bans now. For game number 2, their backs against the wall. If they go down here, the set's done, and Dobbos grab the win.
It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt, because right now going for the first pick this time around after losing that last game, maybe they're going to be the ones trying to figure out when's the right timing for the Odin, because I thought for sure that Dobbos was going to ban away the Odin in fear, because they were banning away anti-hunters. They banned away the Bologna, they banned away the Osiris, and then the next go-to is like either Vamana or Odin, but they were the ones to lock in the Odin for themselves.
Well, Vamana does get banned away, so does Hera. So Shibalanke is open to be taken. I believe so was Freya last game, but didn't see her get prioritized. Another one to keep your eyes on with his first spot. But with Ricardo, there's really nowhere else to go except for the Shibalanke. But that does mean, though, they're giving away this Achilles over to Dobbos Disciples, which I would be not surprised to see them grab.
If they're banning away the Vamana now, maybe Ricardo is considering the Odin at this point already, because knowing the Vamana ulti changes, you can walk through walls, so that's kind of annoying when you have to lock in the big baby, and then all of a sudden the big baby, you can't lock in.
No, it's not unlike Rugrats, where they find a way out of that cage. So can Vamana. Achilles and Bologna, though, both picked up for the same team. I like this idea. They're often thought of as those next two down when King Arthur is taken off the table. Achilles and Bologna can hang with each other. They're both very strong. Now they're both in the same squad, so I imagine we'll see the Achilles in a more aggressive, like jungle-type position, and then Bologna over for solo.
Probably going to be the case. You never really know, though, sometimes with some teams, because you could run the Bologna in that jungle role. Has some good ganks as well with the Eagles rally. We've seen actually in the last set the Bologna support, or sorry, the Bologna carry position.
That's right,
coming from Scott Bros or Scott, but not really too fruitful for them in that set. I would rather see her in the solo.
Well, whatever it is, they'll be having to deal with this Aphrodite, it looks like. I doubt that this one's going to be for Wolvie, if it is still Wolvie that's playing with them. Remember last game, they had Wolvie and Nadrix in instead of their normal ones. It's normally Tyler and Arabiax that were in for them. So I think that's part of it as well. I mean, obviously the picks and bans were rough for Ricardo, but also not being able to play at that full squad. Not 100% sure if this is a full change or they're just having to make some subs. I think these are just substitutions, and we'll see if they'll be in here for game 2 as well.
Taking away the Geb as the last ban for Ricardo. They're really worried about kind of ways to protect the Zeus. And I think that Dobbos are going to go now for the Capri potentially. Not going to be the Sylvanas instead. And I think a lot of it comes down to aggression. Trying to find ways to synergize all that AoE damage that they have between the Zeus.
That's right. This gives them a chance now to sort of match that late game sustain as well. They'll be coming up from the Aphrodite. Not quite as good from a Sylvanas, but it's at least something to try and keep you even, as the Aphrodite can be quite scary. They'll have the Ardio and Cabrakan to round it out. Not just good at locking down targets, but good at keeping this Afro safe too.
That's true. Good burst damage as well.
Must be mid though, right? At this point?
Could be Aphrodite mid, potentially. Ardio solo lane, Rat jungle, Cabrakan support is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so too. Aphrodite in the middle lane can certainly have some trouble. If it is Wolvie there, he might be in some trouble there too. Hachiman rounds out the draft for Dobbos Disciples. They'll be giving that one over to Coast. So some interesting selections for both of them, but Ricardo, they've got to make sure that they make it late if they want this Aphrodite to work. Either way though, we're moving into game number 2. Ricardo up against Dobbos Disciples. It's Aggro and Taco to take the call.
Thank you, Finch and Tolly. Dobbos Disciples look dominant in Game 1. Game 2, they've picked Zeus, so they've already won in my heart.
In my brain, I almost feel like they've won as well when I look at these two compositions. I just feel like Ricardo is making such unnecessary risk with their draft. putting your BX on the Aphrodite, I don't really have too many gripes about that, but it's what you surround yourself with in the side lanes that I start to raise some concerns here. Mr. Turtle and Wolvie on this Kraken, Xbalanque, and duo, not a whole lot of, I think, hard crowd control to really benefit this Aphrodite either. I think that Mr. Turtle might struggle in trying to protect his mid laner early on once the supports do start rotating on over to mid.
Well, it's not the same mid laner as last game for Ricardo. It was Wolvie, now it's Aribiax, so another player that Aribiax has had plenty of experience at this level, subbing in. We'll see how well he can do. Doesn't have a particularly high bar to match up to. Wolvie had a pretty tough game 1.
Mr. Turtle just took 80% of his HP to not even out clear. Well, I guess they technically out clear, but with only 2 archers left, Dobbos disciples aren't under any threat of their purple buff being taken. Both Ricardo and Dobbos dual lanes should be fairly standard starts.
Chronic the Bros is potentially in trouble. Here comes Nate with a blink in. Doesn't have full Acorn quite yet. There's a nice double stun from Colossal. USB gonna head south while Colossal heads north, and looks like the double warriors are off the hook. Thought that was a pretty good fight there for Ricardo there, Taco.
I think Nate just overshot with the blink and the dash in committal. Now Mr. Turtle actually under a little bit of fire here, but Vaporish Ghost and Switch going to be forced back. Shell has been popped as well to keep Vaporish alive. I think that he might have been under threat from the creep wave. A lot of last minute archer damage kind of starting to factor in, but the important thing is that Mr. Turtle stayed alive, because the last thing Wolvie wants to see is another early game kill for Vaporish.
That's right. Wolvie now in ADC instead of the mid lane. The meditation pickup for Mr. Turtle also used in that instance. I imagine that's because Aribiax on the Aphrodite, and sometimes in long late game sieges, Aphro can end up out of mana, so that's what the meditation's there for.
Might also be a just-in-case clause for Colossal, because when you're dealing with an Achilles jungle, you can maybe even psych him out if you have that meditation. It's not a very common relic for support to pick up. Nate right now trying to find an early pressure gank against Colossal, but Arabiax just doesn't have that follow-up damage needed with the back off just yet.
This Aphrodite pick can, I think, be pretty good against Achilles jungle. I mean, no one should really ever get executed. As overpowered USB's in real trouble on this right-hand side, but Chronic all out of cooldowns. Between the heals coming from Lovebirds and the Undying Love ultimate that can immune that execute, really no one around Aribiax should be able to be executed, but that is a lot to ask of your mid laner, especially coming in cold, having not played game 1.
Should definitely help, though, that Wolvie's going to be able to turn off all the lights if things do get a little bit iffy for Ricardo throughout these team fight engagements. That was something that I'm sure Ricardo would have definitely loved to have had in the last match when they were trying to deal with Colossal on that Odin pick selection. And I do think that this is a better composition than what Ricardo were running last game, but I'm just concerned about the level of execution that's required now to pull this one off, because Chronic the Bros has definitely already proven himself in my eyes for this Ricardo squad. I think it's now just waiting on the rest of his team to kind of step it up.
I mean, any Aphrodite composition is how well does your Aphrodite play. I don't think many other gods require so much to work perfectly all the time as Aphrodite does. You know, your casual arena queues, maybe not quite the case, but when it comes to competitive conquest, Aphrodite needs to have an exact idea of where everyone on her team is, and where everyone on their team is, and how much damage they're taking in, how healthy is everybody on my team. It's very, very difficult.
But if I had to bank on an Aphro player being able to control all of those aspects, I would definitely look more towards Arabiax's. Nate right now trying to get a little bit more pressure against Colossal, even chasing him to his own back harpies. An interesting fact, though, is the Ratatosker can match the pressure in a way that an Achilles can also provide, just because you have that semi-global ultimate threat with it through the Cosmos. But going back to that original discussion, Arabiax with this Aphrodite, I mean, he did used to play a lot of Hell. Maybe healers are just more his forte.
Could be. Certainly could be the case, and you have to respect any player that can put that time in and really impact the game on a healer, because that changes the game pretty quickly. Now, Dobbos does have some sustain on their own. It's Sylvanas, of course, the pickup for Switch. But Switch is playing a character in Sylvanas that if you can consistently land pulls onto Aphrodite and root her, then you can force her to use her defensive options much earlier than she would prefer.
Forcing out anything early on from Aphrodite, even if it's just a heal, can be pretty nice to have because it also just gives that 10 to 12 seconds of cooldown is a gateway opportunity, I think, for Dobbos Disciples to look for a collapse period after the fact. So I definitely think that Dobbos Disciples should be looking to prioritize anti-heal and just really trying to lock down this Aphrodite early on, because the more pressure they're able to put into AirBX early on, the better off 60-meter Fly is going to be in the mid to late.
60-meter Fly is playing a character in Zeus that can handle Aphrodite pretty well. She has to be next to someone, so that means Chain Lightning is already going to get some pretty decent value most of the time. An early Divine Ruin is certainly going to be necessary for Fly. Wonder if he's going to pick it up first item overall, as Exile ultimate out from Wolvie when Colossal was really just there to put in a little bit of inconsequential poke in the mid lane. That doesn't feel great, I'd say, for Team Ricardo.
Ooh, this could be problematic for Chronic the Bros, though, but going to be able to evade that bludgeon damage right at the last second. Overpowered USB started to hold his own a little bit better here in this Bologna RDO mashup. Probably stopped putting as many points into the bludgeon as well, since the RDO has such an easy way to interrupt in bear form.
I think it's just the Berserker Shield finish is the big thing for USB. He does have all his points that he can in Bludgeon so far, but it's just Berserker Shield that ends up working out.
An interesting note, I definitely thought that he had a little bit more in Scourge, or even Shield Bash, but overpowered USB, undeterred as always, and still just looking to aggress into Chronic the Bros, having a significantly easier time though clearing out that wave, so probably not much more to be seen over in solo lane, unlike mid lane, where these mid heartbeat contestation points could start to get a little bit spicy.
Dash in from Coast onto Aribiax. That's the focus right away. Heal not going to get enough ticks off. Aribiax falls for first blood. Colossal gets it. Now Nate gonna dunk down on top of Fly. That forces out Switch's ultimate, trying to peel, but Nate was already out of danger. So ult for ult towards the back end of that engagement. The big thing was that Coast's rotation set up an easy kill onto Aribiax.
Switch might have also been expecting Nate to have dropped down just a little bit closer there to actually be in that Wrath of Terra knock-up range. But even without that having connected, Dobbos Disciples have definitely established themselves as the leader for now. Got about 900 gold or so in their favor. And it's mostly the experience that I really want to keep an eye on for these two teams, because Dobbos Disciples have already started pulling away little by little in their side lanes.
Colossal stunned in mid. Jivalake ultimate as well. He Fatal Strikes south, and that's where Nate is going to follow him. Good stun by Aribiax. Meditation there as well, and finally that Cabracket ultimate is going to secure it for Team Ricardo, but it did take them quite a bit of time to bring down Colossal in the mid lane.
A little surprised that 60-meter Fly didn't even opt to drop the Lightning Thunderstorm, try and peel out his Achilles a bit better. Doubt that Mr. Turtle or BX would have wanted to stick around for much longer, but the Lightning Storm does come out just a little bit later than expected, and AirBX doesn't really seem to mind.
Had to use the ultimate, probably off a pull from Switch is what set that up in the mid lane. Still has the Purification Beads though, and the poking out an Aphrodite, usually not going to do a whole lot for you, as Aribiax can heal up very easily. A power-centric build thus far for Aribiax. Also mana, which is relevant on Aphrodite, as I noted with the meditation, but no extra mobility quite yet, and no early protection or anything either. It's really just focused on power early on, which I am a fan of for Aphrodite in the mid lane. You got to get that power to get your scaling up so your heal is actually relevant.
Well, I like the idea of using it for the back off as well. I think that one of the main potencies surrounding Aphrodite in mid is the fact that she can build a little bit more mage damage to try and get those big damage swings on the back off, and even that little bit of a bounce back could be some important peel from Colossal when he's doing just this. And I love the idea that through the Cosmos is going to come crashing down on top of Colossal even.
Nate right there, great damage coming from Fly, nearly took out Nate with that Chain Lightning and Detonate. A couple ultimates traded towards mid, but no one knocked out quite yet. Soul-Laters did rotate over, but by then the fight had already concluded. But all this early sort of posturing in mid lane, as long as no one ends up dying, that almost always favors Team Ricardo, right? Because they have the Aphrodite.
At least until 60-meter fly finishes off whatever pen item he's trying to rush in that second item slot. And personally, Aggro, I'm kind of hoping it's a Divine Ruin.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't think you can ever buy anti-heal early enough when dealing with an Aphrodite-based composition. And it's not even just the Afro. Chronic the Bros as well has a decent amount of self-sustain and team sustain even with the Artio. So there is that pseudo-healer effect taking place coming out of the solo lane. And if Dobbos Disciples aren't careful, this is certainly something that could cause a lot of issues when trying to play around the objectives, just because Ricardo will have such a sustain advantage.
Oh, wow. Fly does go for Spear of the Magus. I agree with you. I think this is the wrong pickup 100%. The early Divine just gives you so much more kill potential in this lane. And sure, he's technically making Switch do a little bit more damage, and Sylvanas damage can be relevant in the early game, but I don't know. It also just means that you get it out of the way, because you have that looming thought in your head that, okay, I need Divine Ruin eventually in this game. If you go Divine right there, then maybe you can end up going something a little bit more aggressive later on. And speaking as aggressive, Ghost actually gets med-baited by Turtle, has to use his own Purification Beads, though Wolvie used his and the ultimate. But good fight there from Coast, nearly got the better end of Wolvie.
Wolvie was ready to box until he got sucker punched in the mouth with the Ai Jitsu. I think that Vaporish was originally looking for the Heavenly Banner damage, and when that didn't come into play, Wolvie, I doubt that he expected the Cabrakan to be as far away as he was.
Early ultimate on the Nate from Switch, though it does some pretty good damage. USB has his ultimate, but that's going to be a little bit wide left. So Nate's A-okay. Did open up a red buff invade, but Nate now wants to get reinvested. Looking at Casper the Ghost. He nailed him. Overpowered USB now in the middle of the entirety of Team Ricardo. No ultimate for him, remember. Bludgeon does some good damage, but not good enough. Wolvie does eventually clean up the enemy solo laner.
Nate might have closed his eyes on the ultimate landing, but he opened them back up to find the last hit for the kill. And I also think that was a really important rotation from AirBX coming out of mid lane, because now with that one pick off overpowered, Ricardo feeling confident enough to pull this Gold Fury. Chronic the Bros doing what he can to try and keep Switch at bay, but it's the lockdown. Mr. Turtle throws out the Teutonic Shift instead, but it doesn't go completely unanswered.
Wow.
60-meter fly being able to pick off Nate in the back line.
And did it without using that ultimate either. Now he's going to come in and drop that Lightning Storm. Great damage onto a Ribiax. Gets the detonate off, but it's just not enough damage. The heal came through for Ribiax and a well-timed ultimate as well. They take down Fly, but it does get Ricardo off of the Fury, at least momentarily, because Wolvie right back onto the objective. Mr. Turtle here alongside him. Overpowered USB is on the way, and he has that ultimate back up.
Wolvie does have a little bit of healing because of those Devo Glows. With only 38 stacks, there's a chance for a steal, but a beautiful mez from Chronic the Bros. Gonna stop Overpowered USB right in his tracks, although it won't prevent the collapse from Chronic the Bros, because Overpowered USB and Colossal still trying to chase this Artio down.
Now, Colossal didn't get in that fight at all. He was in the right side. He pushed the solo lane and got tier 1 tower over there for Dobbos Disciples, and an awful lot of farm. All of a sudden, Colossal's level 13. But is that the right call to take all that farm kind of selfishly while Ricardo pulls Gold Fury 3 times?
Once 60-meter fly goes down, I think it's fair for the Achilles to just solo farm for himself. Play it a little bit more greedy. Nate looking for the individual outplay. Gets the Rathatera, at least from Switch. That's a pretty nice cooldown to have forced. But losing the Pyromancer and the T1 tower keeps the map pressure, I think, ultimately in Dobbos' favor, because with all the objectives down, it's mostly been Ricardo, I think, who have been getting aggressed into. It's their counter gank opportunities that I think AirBX is able to provide. But as far as initiation is concerned, that's going to be pretty tough for Ricardo to find unless Dobbos is not in the laning period.
Basically even after that objective. In fact, a tiny, tiny lead for Dobbos Disciples in the gold department. Seems like XP is in their favor a little bit more heavily. Indeed it is. 2,000 experience. That's mostly on the right side of the map. A slight lead for Overpowered USB and XP. and Colossal has a slightly larger one over Nate, about a level and a half to a level for Colossal in the jungle. This Achilles pick has been somewhat neutralized in the early game, where you expect it to do a lot of the work. Though this is still certainly in the sweet spot for Achilles jungle, is this 3-item point.
I'm still not seeing as much anti-heal as I would have liked to by now, though, Aggro. I'd have to hope that 60-meter Fly's next pen item of choice is going to be that Divine Ruin that we were expecting in the second item before he went that Spear of the Magus. But a really smart foresight, I think, of Ricardo getting Wolvie's ultimate, and Wolvie's laughing, but I don't think he realizes Dobbos is about to have the final laugh if Colossal's able to blink through this wall.
Yeah, Wolvie having a pretty good time, at least in duo lane this time around, in comparison to how it went in the mid lane. Chronic's actually going to teleport in to this tier 1 on the left-hand side. Mr. Turtle's got a pretty good angle on the top side. His Fatal Strike already used. Mr. Turtle looking for an option, but instead knocked up by Switch. They'll turn their attention to him. Big investment onto the enemy's support, and Switch getting lower and finally knocked down by Wolvie, but that was all Mr. Turtle who gets the job done. This Bracken has looked very, very good so far for Ricardo. Now a blink in from Chronic the Bros, finds 2 with that stun. Nate right behind him as well, but Fly's gonna get a big chain lightning off here. Mr. Turtle takes a lot of damage, and overpowered USB finally finishes him off with that Eagles rally, but Aribiak's answering back.
Aribiak's finding a huge backup with the Divine Ruin now being procced. 60-meter Fly just waiting for his chance to detonate. Aribiak has got no one left to heal, and he won't be able to even live himself as he goes down alongside of Wolvie. And now it's just Chronic the Bros versus the world, and the world just a little bit stronger.
60-meter Fly, that fight, man. The aggressive pathing right behind everybody else. This Zeus plays cleanup crew for Dobbos Disciples just as he finishes the Divine Ruin as well. Perfect timing for him to get invested in that fight. But his patience on the detonate, he waits out 2 different Aegises, one from Aribiak and one from Nate, and ultimately brings both down. Really well done, that fight from Fly.
And I also can't help but notice this blink dependency that Ricardo seems to kind of centralize themselves around. 3 blinks one more time. And I guess I gotta wait and see how it pans out for Mr. Turtle. But I almost feel like this is going to be a little bit of a trap for Mr. Turtle, because if he blinks in, Fly's just gonna look to drop the ultimate on top of him. He just thunderstorms him with the Zeus, and you get the detonate stacks for free.
Certainly something to be worried about, though he does have the Reinforced Greaves, a good option against Zeus if you're going to be stuck in that Lightning Storm. It'll stack up your prots pretty quickly. But a pretty good fight for Ricardo overall. It's just Fly coming in late ends up turning it in their favor. I think that watching out for Fly and USB are the 2 you really have to be concerned with now if you're Team Ricardo. Those 2 set themselves up for some pretty good success. 3-1 for each of them. Aribiak in the mid lane already has his ultimate forced. Trades it out for 2 on the other side, but anytime you're killing the Afro, you're in a pretty good spot. And Nate on top of Fly, that gets his Purification Beads and did some very good damage to him. But not enough to bring him down.
Mr. Turtle's here now as well in the mid lane, and it seems as though Ricardo wants to make a stand underneath their Team 1 tower, just lightly pushing Dobbos Disciples back for the moment, realizing that Dobbos, without their Zeus, not going to try and play all that aggressively. Going to have to wait for Fly to come back out of base. And the Primal Furies also had a chance to respawn. This could be a relatively important one because it could mean the difference between winning a Fire Giant fight and getting the objective, or just losing outright.
Disciple's going to be the first one on it. Aribiak's just now leaving base on the respawn, and Primal Fury's already down to half. Chronic going to blink in, looking for Fly. They know he has no relics. Primal Fury still getting lower. Now leashed as Fly locked in that cage. He's putting out some decent damage, but now still on the run. Eventually, Mr. Turtle will bring him down. And they don't even take that much damage in the process here, Taco. Chronic and Turtle still about half HP as Aribiak's on the way to start healing up his frontliners. Dobbos Disciples will immediately start backing up. Just not enough damage put out onto those frontliners for how long they were in the middle of the team fight.
This could definitely be trouble for Dobbos Disciples. They were so invested, I think, on trying to just bring down that Primal Fury before Ricardo had the numbers to match for a contest that I don't think they realized how easy it was for 60-meter Fly to be made the focus.
Nate dashes in, gets it started. Nice double root there from Chronic the Bros, and Colossal and overpowered USB are going to hit the grave. Wolvie gets 1, but all set up by Chronic the Bros And Ricardo now should have a very easy time on this Primal Fury. I just don't know, was it Coast that was not dealing enough damage to the frontliners there? Because I still think that's what really opens that fight up, is that Ricardo's front line gets the dive fly without a whole lot of repercussion.
Coast might just need to bide his time a little bit longer and prioritize farming so he can try and rush that Shin size or even a Titan's Bane. Having a lot of problems, I think, with Chronic the Bros, but a great pull-in onto Mr. Turtle could prove problematic. No, instead, Ricardo just going to back off. They take the T1 tower, and this is where a little bit of player discipline starts to come into effect, because as long as Ricardo reset, BX is going to be there to heal him the whole way through, and now the Pyromancer are being looked at since Ricardo opened up the mid lane.
Chronic the Bros zoning. Wolvie uses the ultimate just to make sure that no one feels comfortable on Dobbos Disciple, so a Pyromancer goes the way of Team Ricardo. Another great game from Chronic the Bros, by the way. No kills for him, but 0, 1, and 8, top of the player damage charts. He sets up that easy double kill by the Primal Fury. I mean, he has played lights out so far this set.
He's been the primary member kind of holding 60-meter Fly at bay. Fly has just not been able to freely maneuver throughout the backline like you want to on the Zeus. And I also do have to give a lot of credit to Mr. Turtle. I was kind of skeptical when I saw this blink Bracken, just because of the fact that he wasn't really able to make much use of the blink in game 1, but now that he's more on even grounds with the rest of Dobbos Disciples, and Ricardo aren't finding themselves down 13,000 gold by the 20-minute mark, he's just able to initiate.
Dive is onto a Ribiax. Already lost the ultimate. Aegis will stop that fatal strike, but Lightning Storm comes down, but switches Dot, gets the job done first. Colosso will match. That is a 1-for-1. It really does seem to be all about killing the Aphrodite so far for Dobbos Disciples, and can't say I blame them, Taco. That's kind of what's making this whole comp tick.
Trading an Aphrodite for an Achilles doesn't feel nearly as bad when you still have a Bologna as your backup warrior. Vaporish Ghost as well, gonna go ahead and take that red buff for himself. Wolvie has also looked phenomenally better in comparison to game 1. And maybe the difference maker is just as simple as Xbalanque having that Darkest Night.
It's tough to fight into, there's no doubt about that. Nate, I think, has had a much better game as well on this Ratatosker in comparison to the Cirquette. I mean, look, no one on Ricardo looked good last game outside of Chronic. Now, just about everyone's looking pretty good, including Chronic, who continues to look like Ricardo's best player, so pretty good start for them in this game. Trying to get the tier 1 tower on this right-hand side. Minions not cooperating too well at first, but eventually they come in and help Ricardo get the job done. It means only 1 tier 1 tower left remaining for Dobbos Disciples, and that's pretty weak on the left-hand side as well.
Little stubborn from Nate and Chronic the Bros. Even after Overpowered USB and Switch started, or were already there, they still just did not want to give up that T1 tower. And I like the commitment as well, because it's going to be tough, I think, for a Sylvanas and a Bologna to try and punish a Ratatosker, even without that through the Cosmos.
Just has such mobility and pretty tanky for Nate. I mean, Void Shield and Blackthorn Hammer, that's good physical protection, good health. Kind of have it all at this point. D-Ward's the Fire Giant for Ricardo, and Mr. Turtle gonna start it up. They got about a minute and a half before that Fire Giant becomes enhanced. And with Sustain, this is kind of the fights that you want them to be taking. The Overpowered USB does have an upgraded Cursed Ankh, and Switch went for the upgraded Phantom as well, so a lot more team fight relics this time around available for Dabo.
But BX going to be able to heal his front line. Got to be careful, though, not to use the birds when Dobbos Disciples are actually looking to go in. Overpowered USB, though, not on the favorable end of this poke exchange.
Ribiax already has to use the ultimate. USB still going forward. Wolvie's ultimate will eventually convince him to back it up. Chronic the Bros not backing up at all. In fact, Nate's coming to give him some support. Colossal already without that ultimate. Nate's going to finish what Chronic the Bros starts, but a great ultimate from Switch and Fly combined to bring down Chronic very quickly. And Wolvie, in a pretty awkward position, has to dash away. Colossal's already on the respawn, so no chance for him to get involved here. But Overpowered USB going to keep it going. Cursed Ankh onto the entirety of the enemy team as Vaporish hits everybody with that mounted archery, but
Ricardo are doing exactly what they need to do, and that's just backing off while that Cursed Ankh is active. BX is going to be able to heal everybody up, but not if he gets caught. Beautiful pull out of Switch. Going to get the Undying Love, and that's the primary threat that Ricardo has to offer in these extended engagements. So without that, cooldown being available now for Ricardo, this is, I think, Dobbos Disciples' period to start looking at that Fire Giant.
They decide not to. They would have only had 5 seconds before it ended up being enhanced, so I don't know that they would have been able to bring it down. Instead, they just back it up. In fact, they're looking for Fly in the mid lane. Wolvie dealing tons of damage, and Switch just has nothing to save his life. A quick dash in with that back off damage enough from Ariviax and Wolvie to bring down Fly.
This isn't game one. Fly can't afford to try and clear waves on his own. He needs to make sure that he has somebody else other than Switch with him, because Switch doesn't have peel as a Sylvanas without that ultimate, really. He's got the pool at best, but that's only if he's accurate, and that's not even factoring in the fact that Ariviax and Wolvie ran at Fly together.
Overpowered USB here to try and stop this Fire Giant pull. Nate all over Vaporish Coast. They get his purification beads with some ease. Fire Giant still going on, it looks like. Getting pretty low. Down it goes for Team Ricardo. They secure the enhanced Fire Giant, and Nate's looking for a little bit more. Stun and knock up onto Colossal as overpowered USB trying to escape as well. Mr. Turtle blink in. Great cage, but a better Phantom from Switch get he and his duo lane partner out. Don't think anyone's doing the same here for overpowered USB. Aribiax gets him. Coast has to hop on the horse to get away, and Ricardo continues the siege, now looking for a Phoenix.
Aribiax, though, might have gone a little bit too deep, going to get caught on those last ticks of the Lightning Storm, but that's the primary method of base defense here that Dobbos Disciples have to offer. They do get Aribiax's ultimate for it, but this Aphrodite is still going to help Wolvie to just keep surging forward.
That's the problem with the anti-heal, man. I mean, you get it on them in the fight, and then they just back up, heal up, and they're back. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that. Right side Phoenix down for Ricardo. This Aphrodite composition working beautifully. Aribiax has 16,000 player healing or something like that.
Aribiax's specialty. I think he's always been kind of drawn towards the healers ever since he was first playing Hell way back in the day when he was first, making his console debut. And now on the Aphrodite, I mean, there's not a whole lot of differences between the Hell and the Afro outside of maybe how you choose to toggle the healing. But I think Aribiax has done a fantastic job on this Aphrodite. And for what it's worth, I also don't think the Dobbos Disciples did enough to try and control it early on.
Yeah, I mean, in the mid game, they did a lot. I mean, every fight was all about killing Aribiax, but I wonder if in the early game they could have just killed the front line instead. I mean, it seems odd to not kill the healer right away, but with the build that Fly went for, that was more suited to killing the tanks than it was for killing the healer. And Chronic the Bros and Mr. Turtle have really just been running it down in all these team fights, and there really hasn't been that many opportunities for Dobbos to respond to that.
If you're going to lose a Phoenix, though, you want it to be the one that's closest to the Fire Giant side.
Yes.
So losing that right side Phoenix means that Dobbos Disciples are still going to be able to play defense on that next enhanced Fire Giant respawn if they choose. Oni Fury could prove to make that a little bit more difficult just because of the fact that all these boosted minion waves could definitely cause some issues if Ricardo chooses to try and make a siege opportunity happen on the opposite side of the map. But Dobbos looks like they pushed up far enough at least to initially defend this next siege attempt from Ricardo.
They're going to need to. So everyone on Team Ricardo getting pretty close to fully stocked in the item department. 5.5 items for most members, 6 for some, like Wooly, who's all done. Nate's going to push the mid lane. Pretty standard to have your jungler split off towards one of the side lanes, especially when that jungler has the global pressure that Ratatosker has, can easily join the fight on this left-hand side when it's appropriate. Right now seems to be the call. Mr. Turtle's already blinked in on the fly. Lightning Storm dissects the team fight pretty nicely, but the dive is still onto the Zeus. Chronic the Bros finally finishes him off as overpowered USB gets cleaned up by Wolvie, but Colossal finds one execute. That one's onto Mr. Turtle, looking for another onto a Ribiax. That one gets body blocked by Wolvie, and he gets himself a double kill. Vaporish does finally kill Chronic the Bros on the back end of the fight, but Nate's still plenty healthy, and they've got this sustain from the Aphrodite. Left side Phoenix is going down, and a right side Fire Minion wave is going to take the attention of Coast and Switch for at least a minute.
Looking for the Titan end is Wolvie all by himself. His other two teammates still on that mid side. Phoenix not realizing how many fire creeps were actually there to help out. And just like that, Ricardo managing to answer back.
They make it not look easy exactly, but a much different story from game one. I mean, Aribiax in mid now and Wolvie moving over to ADC seems to make all the difference in that game because it wasn't just them. I mean, Nate played a lot better. Chronic continued his high level of play. Mr. Turtle looked a lot better. That was a much better team effort from Team Ricardo.
I think that Dobbos might have been a little overconfident when they actually saw the Aphrodite in the mid lane because they really did not seem like they felt all that threatened by Arabiax, kind of just letting him free farm.
Yeah, was pretty easy for him in the mid lane this time around. Got dove a couple times, but ultimately ends up with the victory. A big turnaround from Team Ricardo here in game two. Was it all because of the Aphrodite? Finch and Tully have the answer.
It had a lot to do with it, man. Somewhere around 17K player healing, if not more.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard to stop. So they're back to very near their full roster for Ricardo, and I really think that's the big deal, right? AirBX is back in the middle lane. Again, Wolvie had to sub in for them last game. He still had to sub in this time because they don't have Tyler in, so they're closer but still not entirely full strength, and that was enough.
To go from the mid position to the hunter position
That's
in game
tough,
number
yeah.
2. Playing the Shibalanki, though, so a lot of freedom to do late game hunter things on that god specifically. So a great transition, ending the game at 8-1-6.
Yes, it was very strong for them. Remember, Nadrix had to be in there in the hunter position for them back in game one, so clearly still working to get everybody there. But this Aphrodite wasn't under quite enough pressure. I remember we were watching the game, it's around the 21, 22-minute mark, and I look over and Tully, I'm like, 4 deaths in your Afro at this point? That's not too bad, really. It's kind of like you expect her to get punished some, so if you can make it that far and still have your Aphrodite looking good, then you're in a good spot.
If those kills are only in the early to mid game, you're not worried about it, Finch. As long as you're not losing any objectives. Your tier towers were safe, all the gold furies were not going the way of Dobbos Disciples, so Ricardo still fighting into it a lot. And that was despite facing so much AoE damage against the Zeus, against the Sylvanas, so that healing coming out big.
Yeah, and Wolvie, I think, played very well for them this game. To not even be on their main roster, he's really stepped up for them in this set, I would say, so far. Clearly some struggles in game one, but in game two on the Shibalanke looked much more comfortable, especially early. He didn't have a ton of player damage, but he was the one finishing off those kills, cleaning them up for the team, and getting those members back in respawn, so Ricardo had some room on the map. I also really liked what we saw from Chronic the Bros on this RDO, man. I mean, he was opening up all kinds of space.
That's right, controlling so many players and gods, but you can't forget Nate playing the Ratatasker, doing a good job using that global pressure, cleaning up a few kills. Mr. Turtle on the Kabraking, locking in several members from
He was great
Dobbos,
too.
forcing out a very early Phantom from Switch.
Yeah, this one really did feel like a team effort, but I'm really excited to see this player healing once we move over to the next side. That'll give us the full story on just how much this Aphrodite was able to do. 19,000 at that point. I remember we were watching, I looked over and I said, 4K? That's not really all that much. And you go, oh, yeah, that's Switch though. Look over at Afro.
Yeah.
15,000 at the time, so that'll get it done.
And the thing was, against this composition that Ricardo were running, because of the Kabrakin, because of the Aphrodite, there had to be an investment of the Cursed Ankh and also
Right.
of the Phantom, right? So therefore, you look at the rest of the relic selection from Dobbos Disciples, there's no sprint, there's no horrific emblem.
And I think that you're right, that kind of limited their options. And I like this pick. There's another thing we're talking about watching the game, was that this Aphrodite kind of into the Achilles, because then you have the ultimate to get you away from the Fatal Strike. You can keep people topped up so they're not in execute threshold as often. There was even a very nice body block of the execute in that last siege as well that really stopped, in particular, Colossal from going in and finding a couple more kills. So I think they did a good job limiting what the Achilles is able to do as well.
Whenever you can have a second Aegis for yourself, it goes a long way. You can't stop it with a Khepri ultimate, but you could certainly stop it with the Aphrodite ultimate. And ArabX has been known to play Aphrodite plenty of times before in the past. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a ban for it in Game 3.
Or at least some more strategy around making sure it doesn't happen in this next game.